the new Greenville Development Code was in place, that there'd be some fine tuning that had to happen. And so we've been meeting, with developers on projects and hearing from community members over the last 6 months as a staff, and identified even just some, copy editing changes that needed to be integrated with the code. So this update is a little bit long, but we're capturing a lot in this one fell swoop. So we'll dive in. So with the development code, like Shannon mentioned, we were going to have the public hearing on this at the beginning of January, but with the weather, we've delayed just 1 month. We re-advertised for it as soon as we could. So the public hearing is going to be on February the 13th with the Planning Commission, and then the code updates will make it to City Council after that. We also have several zoning map amendments that are tracking through the 6-month update process, and those will be actually presented tomorrow at the project preview meeting. These are the ones that the city is requesting. And then those will make it forward through the Planning Commission and City Council review process after that project preview meeting. For these, we've had a good amount of public engagement. Really, a lot of the hard work was in these developer meetings and responding to questions from residents. We felt like we had a good handle on a lot of these technical changes that needed to happen leading up to the 6-month update. We presented this presentation or version of it at the December 7th Planning Commission public hearing. On December 9th, we released the entire document with all of the 6-month changes. So that was posted online and has been online since then. We presented the amendments, and staff was present at the December project preview meeting. Neighborhood Association presidents received notification of that, and an alert went out to everybody that signed up for those. January 4th, right after we got back from the new year, we did a coffee with the code session at Unity Park. I think we had like 50 or 60 attendees over the course of that morning, so it was a pretty good turnout. And then on January 5th, we published the staff report for what would have been the January 9th public hearing, but that's remained published this whole time, so the community can review it. Overall, the code seems to be working as intended, delivering on the promises of GVL 2040, which was really the central focus of the new development code. Commercial projects are being designed to meet the new code. We've had, like I mentioned, a lot of meetings with developers to discuss the specific requirements. There's some changes that are having to happen, like adjusting to our new block requirements. There's requirements to build more streets now than what we previously had, and that's really to increase connectivity throughout the community. We've just other options that are really features of the new code about like alternative frontages. So being able to orient development to the Swamp Rabbit Trail or to front a park. So these are new concepts that we didn't really have under the old land management ordinance and are excited. It's just, we need a few more parameters as to what those options look like. We have a provision in there where we're still able to accept single-family residential permits until July 15th of this year that were designed under the previous land management ordinances. So we had a number of subdivisions or projects that were already under development. And so residents have until July of this year to get those permits submitted. They're vested for a while once they do get them in, but there is a deadline to where we can no longer accept applications that were built to those original standards. And then otherwise, we've been updating our applications and board meeting schedules to accommodate the new code and the new procedures underneath it. For the development bonus, this is intact from the original code. We haven't had any projects get permitted underneath it yet with either the height or the density incentives in exchange for providing affordable housing and contributing to open space. With construction costs and interest rates and just the relative newness of these options under the development code, we're not in a position to make any changes yet. And there are projects that are showing interest in some of these development incentives, and we're continuing to work with those developers and hopefully have some projects that that do take advantage of that. And we'll update Planning Commission and Council again at the 12-month mark, and hopefully, see these incentives start to make some progress for affordable housing and open space. So, Shannon, I'm going to go try to cover as much as I can in the next
13 minutes.
13 minutes, and we'll stop when we need to. So, with our new zoning map, we actually are under the previous code. Split zoning was not treated very favorably, and if there were split zoned parcels, a lot of times the staff's position was that those had to be rezoned to a single zoning district. And that's not the case anymore. We actually intentionally applied split zoning to certain properties to help provide a bit of a downstep in the zoning, so less intensive district around some of these areas. So this, for example, is McAllister Square, and the orange strip steps down to, that's RNXB. So you go from potentially, MX5 would be a 5 to a 7-story building, but then along that transition area, you can only do 2.5 stories before you step down into the neighborhood that's over there. So the split zoning is doing something really intentional in that area. And we've just added some additional language as a part of the 6-month update to make sure that we're not, that the zoning in those lots and the development happens is respective to these split zone situations. So, one of the things that I mentioned about being able to design a project to front a park or a riverfront or an open space. We've added some more criteria to what would allow for that to happen. So if you say that you're designing a project to front on open space, we're looking for that to be at least 25 feet wide, dedicated and allowable for public access. So putting in some minimum criteria so that if you're going to take advantage of that, and there are advantages to developing this way, that it's still resulting in a quality product and there's benefit for the residents, for the city, and for that community. Build-to requirements. These are pretty important for a form-based code. So this helps bring that building mass up to the street line, helps create a more urban, walkable environment, makes you feel more safe and protected from vehicles, traveling interior to a site. Some of our, and this is one that we've really gotten some feedback on from the development community, some of our projects, just due to the nature of Greenville's topography and existing development patterns, are going to have a little bit of trouble meeting this requirement, for enforcing it black and white. So we've identified a need for a little bit more flexibility. We've researched some other communities, so like the city of Raleigh has gone back and allowed for more flexibility based on some of those site conditions and prevailing layouts. So we still have the requirements, but it does give the administrator and the staff a little bit more room to make these projects actually get across the finish line. Our use table, just a few minor changes, and the staff's thinking is that this is in line with helping to protect neighborhoods, which is one of the central tenets of the new code. So for wireless communications towers, those are the tall ones, not the ones in the right of way. But for the tall ones, those would require a special exception in our residential districts now. We've also made some changes for entertainment and recreation uses, outdoor animal care facilities, tattoo facilities is a new addition to the table, and then general office. And some of this has been to limit them to more of the industrial or heavier business districts and move some of these less desirable uses away from our residential neighborhoods. And then there's supplemental regulations further within the code to help protect neighborhoods. Likewise, removing tattoo from personal. I'll actually go to that. Tattoo facilities. This was an amendment that we were working on and received some additional feedback from the community. With the 6-month changes, we've broken out tattoo facilities from the general personal services. So are proposed to be located in our BG, BH, and IX districts. So those are your business and then your industrial flex districts. Still required to receive DHEC permits, and there's some spacing and distance requirements under the state law that they have to receive to get a permit from the state and from DHEC. We're not allowing them within 300 feet of a parcel zoned park or PK. They cannot locate on a parcel abutting a house scale district. So that's like the RHA down to RHD, and proposing a hourly hours of operation on there where they have to close by 9 p.m. Informing these regulations, we did research with other Greenville County jurisdictions, and most of those other communities either don't allow them, period, or they're permitted in their commercial and industrial districts. So we think that these changes are more in keeping with other communities in Greenville County. And so there's still opportunity for tattoo parlors and whatnot to open in Greenville. It's just a little bit more meticulous on where they can locate. So mobile food units, City Council worked on a specific amendment for these a couple of years ago, and we've seen great success with our new food trailers and food truck allowances that were under the LMO. We moved those over to the Greenville Development Code. We're still allowing them to operate everywhere that they are today. We've tightened up some of what can go on those sites. So some of the signage and other site furnishings that might come in, we've cleaned up that a little bit. And then they can go onto a lot, but they cannot be the primary business. So we would not allow, for example, for a food truck to park on a lot downtown and then build up, picnic tables and umbrellas just as the entire business. So we would look for in those situations, it would have to be an actual restaurant. The food trucks are really supposed to be an accessory kind of food unit for the principal use on the lot.
Are we saving our questions till that?
Yes.
A couple others. We have a new trail construction requirement. It's actually under our streets section of the code. So when you're installing sidewalks or doing street improvements for a project, if there's a planned route for a greenway extension or trail on an approved plan, the current code doesn't really provide a whole lot of flexibility. You would have to build the trail to whatever that prescribed width is. We have found that this is oftentimes disproportionate to the actual scale or scope of what a homeowner or project may be doing. So if someone wanted to add a porch, to the back of their house, and they were shown as having a trail extension coming across the front of their property, under the black and white standards of the code today, they would have to build that trail segment in order to get a permit for the home. We thought, that's probably asking a little bit much. So we're instead going to allow for an easement, or if you're farther away, we might look at a fee in lieu option as a part of a future code update. But trying to balance this and make it a little bit more reasonable. This is an example of where we're just kind of cleaning up the language of the code to match real world scenarios and conditions. Circular driveways, these still get requested from time to time, and in many neighborhoods, usually the answer has been no. This was a provision and a carryover from the old land management ordinance, but under the new code, we're proposing to allow them. It was tied into whether or not 50% of the homes on a block already had them, as to whether or not someone could get one, and now we're just making them by right subject to engineering approval. I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit. I want to cover engineering. They spent a lot of time working on some pretty comprehensive updates to the stormwater regulations under the code, with Stormwater 2.0 and updating the flood maps citywide based on that 2019 study. There's some pretty extensive revisions to the stormwater chapter of the new development code. These were still kind of in a draft form when we adopted the original code. So the amendment document is, pretty lengthy, but a big chunk of that is that update to the stormwater chapter of the Greenville Development Code. And that's, updating the fee schedule to reference the city budget instead of specifically laying out what it would have been under the code. And that's been the practice for several years now. It also updates those flood maps and removes the references to those and instead references that new 2019 floodplain study. So some pretty big changes to that section, but they're important and tied into that adoption process for the new flood map for the city. One other quick thing really is the project preview meetings. We've seen these be really popular. We're getting great feedback. The attendance has been good. People really enjoy being able to learn about multiple projects going on in the community. And so we're adding a couple of other project categories tied into some of the certificates of appropriateness for the downtown projects and certain projects in our historic districts. And that's just helping to raise awareness of these projects that are coming down the pipeline. We encourage members of the community to sign up for those alerts. Sign up just like you do to get a council agenda or a planning commission agenda. We've set it up on the city website. And so if anybody is interested or has a constituent interested in getting those notifications, we're happy to walk them through that process. So just have them reach out. So Shannon, I'll turn it over to you. Got a couple minutes for questions.
Thanks, Michael. I think I'd like to stress on the project preview meetings, the success that we're seeing with those is that they're so much more transparent than if you just leave it up to a developer to send it out to a neighborhood, not knowing who in the neighborhood's going to receive it. Did everyone receive it? What was the radius? I mean, there was a certain defined radius before in the code, but this way now, we post the preview, the PowerPoint in advance so everybody can look at it. Anybody can come to the meeting. So even if you weren't before in the defined boundary, we talked about that a lot during the text amendments a couple of years ago, increasing it from 500 to 750 to 1,000. Now, that just allows for a lot more visibility into projects that haven't even yet been submitted to the city. And so I think that's the important thing that, these are projects that have not yet had an application to the city. They're required to go, and they're one of the categories, to the PPM, the project preview meeting, for review with the community before submitting an application to the city, so that there's ample time for people to know that a project has being contemplated. And then if it's submitted, what that timeline is to make sure that they're aware of the project and have time to submit their comments. So I think the PPMs have been very successful, and it's something that it was a result of the new code. Michael, actually, it was Michael's idea. He won't say it, but I will. It was Michael's idea, and I think that we just continue to refine that process and try to make it better. So I think that we're really happy to see that people are learning about these and getting an interest in attending these meetings.
The neighborhood presidents all on the alert for those?
They are.
Good.
Sir.
Three quick things. First, broadly speaking, kudos to everybody involved, Michael, Shannon, the planning team, because this was obviously an intentional pledge and sincere commitment back in the summer as we sought to finalize the development code, and it's playing out right now. We said we're going to check in 6 months, 12 months, and that's exactly what we're doing. So thank you. One, do we have a plan? If so, great. If not, can we develop one just to further advertise within the professional community about this single family residential kind of July 15th, 2024 deadline?
Yes.
Hopefully that's a pretty concise group, especially those working locally in support of single family residents, to be aware of that. Two, I commend the semicircular. I know it's circular. I view it as semicircular drives. Over time, I've never found somebody who says, please continue to keep those out of Greenville, but I've found a lot of people who said, why in the world can't we do this? So I think that's a sensible update. And then the third thing, if it's easy, if it makes sense to do so, I'd love to, and maybe council would agree, just to see a list, and it's kind of like, thus far, the most frequently cited things that folks want to see examined in these revisions. Because you're showing some of them, but I mean, from a context standpoint, if it's disproportionate that 90% of the people want to see blank, and then it trickles down from there, I'd just love to have a pulse check of that type.
I think the ones that we probably received, at least from the building community, that they wanted us to look at were the build two lines. That was the number one, was the build two line requirement and us being able to have some flexibility with that. And number two were the circular driveways. I can't tell you how much time myself and many others on planning staff have spent on circular driveways over the years. So obviously the community wants it. I think it's just best to provide for it.
And that was my question. That was my second question about the circular driveway. And if anything, as y'all do all your great planning, we need to start small. You know, there could be certain areas where they would have sufficient room and they could, you know, based upon, but it has to be limited, et cetera. Because the circular driveway, that's all I get questions about. Why can't we have a circular driveway, et cetera? Because they see them on TV all the time, I'm sure. But anyway, and another question I had was, right before that, something about adding the back porch and the easements. Could you go back to that? There was I'm trying to think what I was trying to.
On the train.
It was on the trail construction. Let's see, single use dwelling, and you had visual way requirements to construct trail and require an easement instead of accommodating through trail construction. Okay, all right, that's better. Okay, I don't know where I'm looking on the back.
We're still laying
that was on that, yeah, on the streets, yeah.
The easement will allow for, it makes it a lot easier to go down in a couple of years.
Okay.
Once there might be a string of those easements to
Right.
be able to go in and install a trail like that. So we're still planning for that future connectivity. But if you're far away from a trail today, our thinking is that it's a lot to ask someone who's, you know, a mile away from the closest actual physical trail to put in, you know, a 10-foot path across the front of their property. So
Councilor Dow, you had a question?
Yeah, just on, a couple things. Wireless communication facilities and freestanding towers. So you mentioned, so before, in the code, is it, the new code, the way I read it, they were permitted in RH districts, and now we're going special exception required. And those are exclusively cell towers. It reads freestanding tower. That could only be a cell tower, right? So I guess my question would, right? So A, is that communicated to our cellular providers? That it's like, I can't tell you how quickly one went up in a block from my house and you don't even know it till it's there.
the special exception requirement was in place under the LMO.
Okay.
And we noted, we identified this as one of those things that we need to go back and fix.
Okay. And so the cellular provider or the property owner would have to publicly notice that? Okay. One thing I want to make sure I'm interpreting right is stormwater. Stormwater, Paul. The way I read it, and tell me if this is generally true or not, is that we are tightening up our requirements for major and minor stormwater permits, especially, and how they pertain to like multifamily condo duplex. The square footage, the geography is shrinking for when a major is required.
More or less than minor. There will be stormwater controls on a small scale where there wasn't before.
Okay.
The major is staying the same.
But a minor, based on geography, where you didn't have to have it before, now you do.
Right.
Which I see is, I mean, not to be underestimated in the impact on the city.
Yeah.
That's very key. So good kudos on that one, I'll say. And then kudos on the outdoor care facility. So now it's special exceptions, outdoor care facilities for BH, IX, and IG. And I think of some of the properties along Lawrence Road, Fair Heights may be abutting those. I don't know. Do they, is it conceivable they could still be adjacent to a residential area? If you think about where they're now, they are special exceptions that people should be notified, but I don't want us to go down that road of problems.
Which category is this?
For outdoor kennels, outdoor animal storage. Those communities along Fair Heights is the one that jumps to mind, could be abutting a BH or a BI, a BG, sorry. But all that to say is if it's special exception, it has to be publicly noticed and they'll have a voice in it, correct?
Yes, and it'll have to go to the PPM. and it would have a public hearing.
Okay,
Yeah, and as additional clarification, right now they're just listed as permitted
right,
under the code, so we're adding the special
Right.
exception requirement.
humongous difference. Okay, good. I think that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Yeah, can we go to
Okay.
food trucks, please? I assume we've reached out to the food truck folks.
I don't know, this
Some of them
actually,
came to one of our meetings.
back when we did the
Two
text
times.
amendment, we did, but we're not taking away anything from the text amendment. We're just clarifying some of the rules. That's
Okay.
it. Because before, when under the LMO, it was almost prohibitive to have a food truck. And so we're not trying to go backwards. I think this is just more clarification of our food truck
I
standards.
think I'm just, what does no signage or site fixtures permitted mean?
It just means that if it's a food truck and it's temporary, it cannot be by itself the only use on the lot where it becomes permanent. That's what the intent of the ordinance
No,
is.
this, no signage or site fixtures.
That would be for the site, for not on their food truck. They can have signage on their
Okay.
food truck. That
Okay.
just doesn't read very well, but that's actually signage for a property.
Okay, and then require food units to be removed at the end of each day. Does it define what that, what that means?
They can't stay overnight on the property. And so we've had this issue, and we're trying to address it where most of them will move at night over property, or remove from night
So
over
they can,
property.
is it defined in the law that what we're talking about is where they are servicing that particular day?
That's right. They can't stay there overnight.
Is that clear in the law?
Yes,
Okay, so if I've got a restaurant,
or it will be in this update.
okay,
It's
so if I've
clarified.
got, say, gyros
Uh-huh.
across from me, the one-eyed goat, is excellent.
Donkey.
And also the donkey, which is excellent. You should try the goat.
I
but the
prefer
donkey is
goat.
really good.
Donkey.
It's
more tender.
they park their vehicle on a lot behind two chefs and behind their restaurant.
What we're worried about is if they go and let's say they're going to a block party.
They go to
Overnight.
community tap.
Right, they can't be keeping it at community tap overnight. Do you understand what I mean? Because
Okay.
it's temporary to that site.
Okay, is it, and what is that defined? Is that they have to be gone by midnight?
I think we just have I don't think we have a time period in there. But we can add it. I mean, that's.
No,
I mean, if you
I
want us to-
definitely don't want to do that. I just want to make sure we're not being overly restrictive with an industry that we're trying to grow. That's all.
When you guys do the wording on that, can y'all make sure that the wording allows for the type of situation that he's talking about? So if a restaurant owns a food truck, that they're allowed to keep their food truck on their property?
Yes,
That
we can
only
address
applies-
that.
I mean, it's already in the PC, right? So we could amend at council.
That's right. You can amend it, council. This has already been public notice for the planning
Okay.
commission.
But if we need to
y'all
amend
have the
it.
ability to amend any of these, which is why we wanted to update you now before it was in front of you.
Do we
Good.
think
Albert.
this is
That
who
was
does
the
it in
internal
February?
review.
It's gonna probably be
Okay,
in
so
front of
language
you.
along those lines.
It's probably gonna be in front of you either February 26th or the first meeting in March. I'm thinking we're gonna try to do it in February because we're a month behind. We lost a month because of weather. And, it'll be time to do our 12-month review again in July. So I want this one passed before we have to get into the 12-month review.
Okay.
Because we promised, and we were gonna do, we promised that's what we were gonna do. Okay, Councilmember Gibson.
I was just asking, city attorney to press some language for an amendment that would clarify that
Okay.
that way.
Yeah.
Very good.
Let's make sure we invite them, because that made all the difference in the world the
We
last
can
time.
do that.
They're real clear, and they were very happy that we even considered them. So I'm just saying, let's do it. Make sure.
We can do that before it comes to council.
Well, that'd be pretty easy. I mean, it's just, if you own the food truck, Highway 301 or.
Well, we can get the information for who's doing it through business license in the city, because to operate in the city, they have to have a business license. So that's easy enough for us to pull and make sure that they have a chance to comment on any of the proposed
And we've
language.
got some leaders in that industry too that have been out, okay.
Okay, we're out of time. Any other questions for today? This is your preview. All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it later.
Is it?
Oh, yes, we will. Yes.
They like that.
Oh, see,
All right, we executive session matters.
We're going
Mayor
into
and council,
executive
you have
session.
3 items to discuss in executive session this afternoon. All are permitted for discussion in executive session under code section 3470A2. One's an update on zoning matter and litigation, as well as potential litigation related to enforcement of a city ordinance restricting business hours for particular industries. And then for discussion of prospective contracts for donations to the city for various park projects.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor say aye.
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 Ayes have it.
Okay, we'll wait until everybody's exited.
Sound like exciting matter.
Was it good?
Oh, yeah, it's good.
Megan,
Can
we get- Are we off up here? Betty's still on.